Every nation on Earth teeters beneath the weight of an insatiable hunger for growth, ensnared in a debt that seems never-ending. If all owe something, then who indeed holds the strings of this staggering financial web? As headlines scream about rising figures, $1.5 trillion in debt, an unsettling reality looms. Our futures flicker uncertainly in this vast abyss of obligations. The paradox is alarming. The more we borrow, the more we convince ourselves we're thriving. With cash easily accessible and credit cards gleaming, we've become eloquent storytelling creatures, spinning dreams financed by promises that may evaporate like morning mist. This is not merely a failing of individual ambition. It's a systemic ill, a well-structured entity hidden in plain sight. An empire firmly rooted not in lands, but in contracts, interest rates, and the intricate art of deferral. As we peel away the layers, the story unfurls. We look back not at wars or revolutions, but at the shrewd architects of finance whose innovations sculpted our contemporary environment. In the shadows, figures loom: William Patterson, Nathan Rothschild, J.P. Morgan, and Paul Volcker, all levers in the machinery of an intricate system, one whose finest details were forged in cash-strapped eras. Patterson, with his audacious founding of the Bank of England in 1694, was the first architect forging the concept of government debt. At a time when the notion of borrowing from the future was grotesque, he introduced a vision: offer money to the crown, and the crown will pay it back. A simple exchange, one that catalyzed generations to come. Nations, entangled in budgets and war efforts, adopted the model, birthing the concept that debt could serve a country's growth rather than merely bind its rulers. It reframed the rhetoric of national pride and prosperity, hooking nations on a cycle of expenditures rooted in borrowing. Fast forward through centuries of financial intrigue, and we meet Nathan Rothschild, who dissected and redefined the rules again. With unparalleled foresight, Rothschild manipulated the system miles ahead of competitors. He recognized the pulse of money in societal currents, leveraging his wealth to build an empire not through conquest, but via financial might. He invented bonds as a currency of trust and prestige, reshaping the flow of capital and emphasizing debt as a vital mechanism for wealth generation. In his time, liberty wore a new mask, shielded by leveraged investments that often bore the faces of unwary investors, those tethered hopelessly to the whims of the market. As the world shuffled into the industrial age, we find J.P. Morgan, whose very name echoed through the towers of finance. He transformed the landscape once more, extending a lifeline to faltering corporations and distressed governments alike. During the economic roiling of the late 1800s, he recognized instability as an opportunity for control. By consolidating failing industries and threading the needle of financial complexity, Morgan didn't just save entities, he turned disaster into his own empire of influence. Throughout his reign, a chilling truth crystallized. Debt was not merely a liability, it was power incarnate, wielded like a sword for financial domination. Continuing into modernity, our gaze shifts to Paul Volcker, who stood staunch during tumultuous times in the late 1970s and early 1980s. As inflation surged like wildfire, his policies curbed spiraling rates of spending and borrowing, yet he sowed seeds of dependency within governmental fiscal policies. The risk of inflation was curtailed, but a dangerous precedent was set. The delicate balance between accessibility and responsibility was disrupted, and soon, a new view on debt emerged. It transformed into a practice of resource management for governments and corporations, rather than a last resort. What appeared initially as a solution became an entrenched addiction. As we navigate the past, a troubling trend unfurls. Subsequent generations have developed a cultural allegiance to borrowed fortunes. With every credit card swipe or dulcet promise from banks, society's fabric began to coil tighter around borrowed futures. Conservatism and frugality morphed into a bygone testament, with conspicuous consumption celebrated as the American dream itself. What became a means to an end corroded into the chains of financial dependency, a cyclical dance of debt, desires piled on desires, leading ever deeper into the abyss. Yet, beneath this surface of prosperity lies an increasingly fragile structure. What appears as endless growth fosters a haunting uncertainty, the notion that prosperity born from debt is time-limited. Recent years have highlighted that fragility with uncanny clarity. When global unrest in 2020 sent shockwaves through economies, it was that very architecture of borrowing that began to tremble. Governments initiated mass funds, introducing sweeping financial stimulus as if magic could solve systemic issues. Trillions were swept into circulation without regard for the implications. The illusion of prosperity became the hallmark of a troubled age. Simultaneously, people grasped the shadowy truth: real resources had dwindled. The very foundation upon which this empire was built, a collective belief in the future, was now shown to be mere digits, flickering on screens. As production halted, so did the facade of autonomy. Each locked business and school closure unraveled mystery and revealed a stark reality, toppling the grand illusion of debt-sourced wealth. Now the narrative unfolds. The emergence of digital debt looms nearer. Central banks reinvent the landscape once more, ushering in digital currencies and programmatic money. Each transaction meticulously traced, every penny accounted for. What at first seems like financial innovation transforms into a chilling control, a surgical precision governing each individual's financial existence. The realm of currency within silicon becomes a realm where freedom evaporates yet again. Each click, each banking app, becomes another whisper of acquiescence to invisible forces. But underpinning this vast empire lies the delicate thread of trust. Trust is a deceptive force, often overlooked in our velocity-centric lives. Trust that today's wages will nourish future aspirations. Trust that money will retain its worth. It's a thread woven deep into the fabric of society. One shred of doubt pulls at this elaborate tapestry. Look back again to 2022, when inflation surged and the soothing balm of credit began to sting. The charade faltered as reality grated against perception. Consumers felt vulnerable, and for the first time, faith began to crumble. The financial facade cracked, revealing the exploitation which lies buried beneath layers of paper money. Governments quarreled over scapegoats. Supply chain disruptions, wars, and climate shocks suddenly became convenient distractions from a core truth. Here lies the truth. Inflation isn't a mere misfortune. It embodies a more profound disease. It morphs into an insidious tax without need for votes, siphoning individuals dry while nurturing the empire's expansion. Debt persists as both the warrior and the enemy, a self-replicating machine demanding more with each setback, as country after country falls into an endless feedback loop. As we ponder the future, three paths diverge, each leading to discomfort: a controlled collapse, a surrender to digital governance, or a jarring revolt. Each avenue represents the same continuum, the moment of reckoning when those caught in currents of credit are left naked before the truth. Detachment accompanies every reset. History teaches us that during every crisis, power invariably shifts from the complacent to the astute. In such tumult, clarity emerges. The value once lent in currency lies now in tangible creativity, resourcefulness, and genuine connection. The bewildering labyrinth of the empire's structure frames humanity's enduring essence: what can be crafted, built, and shared, sunlit and free. When illusions fade, a foundation remains. Thus, this empire's demise doesn't sprout from a lack of strength, but from a catastrophic breach of belief. Just as the scales tilt, reality casts shadows, and the progeny of the impending reset shall learn, true wealth does not reside in debt's embrace, but in independent thought, industry accomplished through collaboration, and resilience born from accurate perception of circumstance. And when the dust settles and the ledger resets, something uniquely powerful emerges: the potential for hope sketched upon a blank slate. Because every empire, including this one of debt, finds resurrection hidden beneath dismantled illusions, a chance to redefine worth by understanding, and those equipped to write the rules anew will emerge authors of legitimate legacies. Ultimately, the question endures: when the empire of debt inevitably cracks and the interests transpire into unforeseen resolutions, where will you stand? Will you choose to pay the interest on the debt or grasp the quill to rewrite the terms of engagement? For the answers are not some obfuscated future. Rather, they reside within the echoes of yesterday's lessons. In the waning glow of the empire's veneer lies a potent truth, ready to anchor in the clarity of minds, ready to resurface as power shifts once again among us. As the weight of collective disillusionment began to coalesce into clouds of realization, a narrative surfaced, one that was not merely a history of financial turmoil, but an awakening of thought. Citizens, now keenly aware of the facade, started engaging in conversations that had long been silenced. They gathered in small groups, community centers, and online forums, sharing not just fears but ideas for progress, pathways leading away from the cliffs of credit. The facades began to peel, revealing human connections overshadowed by digits and contracts. In coffee shops across countries, individuals convened, liberated by the unshackling wisdom that there was value beyond the blinkered pursuit of material wealth. Here, a former banker spoke of percentages and interest rates, now infused with a deep sense of regret and frustration for having been a cog in the wheel of the ever-churning debt machine. In the corners, activists spread ideas born from age-old philosophies, whispering futures rooted in sustainability, sharing frameworks pivoting on local economies, community currencies, and cooperative ownership. Conversations turned from despair to action. They reflected on where human creativity flourished and how, at its core, the economy could rise not from indebted needs, but from collective talents and ingenuity. They began making local investments, reviving crafts, and forging paths to cooperative structures where resources could be shared, not owned. In doing so, they rewrote the laws of engagement, swerving away from the predatory nature of credit towards models that interested society in shared prosperity. As these disruptors, free thinkers from all walks of life, positioned themselves against the towering empire of debt, a curious tension arose. The ruling entities, banks and governments, seemed threatened. Their usual operational heft grew cautious, uncertain, as communities flourished. Gripped by fear of losing control, they sought to adapt the existing paradigms, yet they faced a new adversary, one not manifested in a single person, but in the collective heartbeat of once subdued masses. Simultaneously, tech revolutionaries began experimenting beyond the horizons of mainstream finance. Blockchain emerged as a hopeful deliverer, decentralizing power and enabling autonomous transactions, all while shunning intermediary control. The allure of cryptocurrency, for all its complexities, served as a vessel of independence for the newly emboldened. Communities began to forge digital currencies for exchange within their confines, sidestepping the empire's ubiquitous reach, igniting renewed hope and engagement with tangible local economies. As the cycles of debt reared their heads again in the news, warnings of inflation, inefficacies of printing endless money, discourse thrived, allowing skepticism to flourish. People scrutinized the gatherings of financial elites and their promises, once considered solid, now haunted by their feeble ramifications. The masses no longer took proclamations regarding interest rates and market rebounds at face value. They pieced together narratives that illuminated histories interwoven with marginalized experiences. Amidst urban landscapes, artists, poets, teachers, and builders began painting murals that gave shape to dreams of resilience, capturing optimism in strokes where once fear had festered. Their medium transformed the walls into canvases, stunning the eyes with stories neglected within ivory towers, of human connections untethered from the rigid confines of credit and debt. Communities discovered fortitude in their jointly crafted futures, akin to threads. When woven artfully, they transform into tapestries richer than the individual strands. The scare of inflation stung, yes, but within the bitterness lay a clarion call. The passion rippled outward, urging individuals not merely to survive the storms, but to reshape the architecture of their financial existence. Perhaps the turbulence was an opportunity, a catalyst leading to a reckoning whereby the empire was not just a shared anxiety, but an entity poised for transformative engagement. Households began modifying their narratives surrounding consumption, championing a culture embedded with intentionality and mindful connection to resources. They shared knowledge on bartering and time banking systems, recognizing that relationships hold inestimable worth beyond the currency of credit. Trust, forged anew in this environment, surpassed mere expectations. It laid down foundations that anchored their pursuits. Each commitment was a promise adorned with transparency, collaboration, and collective growth. New leaders emerged, elevating the discussion of wealth from sums and balances to lived experiences, reframing it as contributions, time, and respect. Schools adopted curricula proposing critical thinking around personal finance, empowering youngsters to engage meaningfully with their future, arming the next generation with tools to dismantle the age-old dreads of debt dependency. Yet the empire of debt responded, tightening its grip where it could. Regulatory responses slipped forth, disguising themselves as efforts for public good. New digital frameworks arose that seemed beneficial at face value. Expedited loans and microfinancing programs framed with alluring salesmanship, grooming citizens into reliving the cycles they were striving to escape. However, those once trapped now possessed clarity. Exposure to debt's slippery tendencies woke a resilience that had languished, compelling them to question whether the band-aids offered were mere illusions, aimed at merely prolonging dependence on the system. Resistance accumulated strength. The streets echoed the empowerment of shedding outdated notions of financial worth. Gatherings ignited spirited discussions on localized investments and stewardship of resources. Schools collaborated with community centers, integrating workshops voicing cooperative ventures unfolding amidst uncertainty. Media cycles turned as engaged citizens, transformed cultural narratives that persisted through generations, showcasing personal stories of pioneering transformation. And then, as history is prone to do, the pendulum swung. The familiar chime of collapse reverberated quietly, then suddenly crescendoed as larger institutions faltered under weight yet again. Nation after nation staggered, unveiling systemic weaknesses once brushed aside. Some financial titans once deemed untouchable fell, exposing the cracks of a structure portrayed as imperturbable. This time, however, resistance had thoroughly permeated the fabric of society. Citizens were ready. They understood the repercussions of unfettered chaos, rallied back from the fallout with newfound ambition. As the dust began to settle around larger-than-life entities crumbling, communities surged forward, holding aloft the futures crafted through cooperation, innovation, and trust. Not marked by loyalty to credit scores, this emerging alliance fostered relationships grounded in mutual support. A renaissance, it seemed, from the ashes of a colossal machine that had once loomed large over their lives. An unshackled spirit of inquiry began to rise, reminiscent of forgotten eras where value thrived based upon skill, effort, and meaningful connection. With digital systems now equipped to honor autonomy rather than enforce oversight, a canvas stretched wide with possibility. True new ventures, unshackled from the legislative grip of bureaucracy, found tremendous growth. And amidst it all, shared resources, creative collaboration, and wisdom found their rightful place. Familiar faces became collaborators on transformation, building legacies beyond borrowed lifetimes. The echoes of the past remained, reminding the hapless traveler wandering the labyrinth of a broken economy. The empire of debt may wane, but not without leaving behind a canvas filled with lessons, illuminating the futility of misplaced trust. A reimagined narrative emerged, echoing through the streets and homes, resounding truth anew. It rests not in the glitter of capital or cryptic systems, but in the very essence of existence shared together. At last, as they rise from the remnants of a system that once dictated every interaction, the question remains not merely what they will build, but the trust they will choose to nurture, breathe life into, and carry forth. And with that determination, they hold a quill poised not just to rewrite terms, but to reshape the very essence of wealth itself within the tapestry of society, crafted with understanding, unity, and an unyielding spirit. And in this chaotic becoming, the most resilient legacy remained, one that those new architects of value cherished above all, to forge a joint destiny grounded in faith, driven by innovation, that would not just resist the empire, but dismantle it entirely, piece by unyielding piece. They awoke to possibilities anew as payments fell silent, a melody of potential unfurling in their wake, waiting for each of them to seize their rightful place in a world reborn. In the end, it was not debt that wrote their story. It was the courage to create anew.